Virginia is a swing state where I've lived most of my life. I've often been called a filthy centrist for indecision over political beliefs caused by the melting pot nature of the state. In particular, I moved 17 times growing up, 3 more since living on my own, mostly to different places in the state, and especially within the city of Virginia Beach, which is home to multiple naval bases, an Air Force base, and the largest pleasure beach in the world, which is a lower middle-income tourist trap for the whole Upper East Coast. Almost everything that exists here does so in chain form. Even local restaurants typically have 3 or 4 locations spread across this city, which, while home to less than 500,000 people, has the landmass of an entire major metropolitan area. This despite the fact that it belongs to Hampton Roads, a collective of 6 cities surrounding the James River in Lower Virginia, which identifies itself similarly to a single metropolis despite taking up the space of 4 or 5. The populace of Virginia Beach is half old white people that either grew up here or retired here or both, and half migrants from New York City, Atlanta, or anywhere surrounding Lake Ontario, where people tend to take a trip to Virginia Beach, then learn that it was in fact considered once by Forbes the best city to live in the U.S. for its outstanding credit rating, school system, low crime, which is the result of very active police, compared to cities of similar size, especially neighboring ones, which are quite dangerous, and fair weather most of the year. It only snows 1 day a year, and everything shuts down so we can enjoy it. I know I just counted 2 halves of the population, but the third is the extreme abundance of military personnel, including those at the base in neighboring Norfolk and people who travel to and from that city. Virginia's weather, while rarely awful, worst is the humidity in late July and August, or winter days in the 40s, barely cold, is extremely unpredictable, to the point that there is the idiom, "Don't like the weather in Virginia? Wait a day, it'll be different." People from places known for their odd weather are surprised when they come here, how halfway into May there are 80-degree days with 50-degree nights, followed by rain on a 60-degree day that abates into a 75-degree one. It's utter madness. The weather affects people's moods in so many incredible ways. It took me more than 20 years to recognize the pattern of headaches and lethargy I encountered during the low-pressure front preceding a thunderstorm, for a small instance. Being close to the ocean and very close to the moon by way of our position on the earth, people in Virginia are especially connected to the tides. We are tide water, after all. Our teams are the tides, and everything here is nautical or ocean-themed, but tides is kind of the through line we went with. Needless to say, the people here have tides as well, waxing and waning through the day, high tide, low tide. One time when I was 15, I played Gears of War on Xbox Live, and someone asked me where I was from. I answered Virginia, and he responded, "That's why you sound like a southern fag." I was surprised by this because I hadn't thought of my voice as particularly southern, considering that my grandma has the real Appalachian accent from growing up in Hillsville. Real name of real place. And I don't even perceive Virginia as particularly south, considering how much of our culture and population is imported from New York City. It's understandable that we'd be perceived that way, since we were the capital of the Confederacy, and certainly a lot of that life's blood runs through the state, but we've infamously been hastily erasing it in recent times. We became a blue state through the Obama administration and even stayed that way for Trump, though VA Beach itself was 51% for the guy. We even have a new governor who's taken pretty heavy anti-gun measures in a state where open carry is just as common as drive-by shootings, that is to say, very. When I listen to old recordings of my voice, I almost become sad by how southern I actually did sound and how much I beat that out of my speaking voice in fabricating a presentable sense of self for the internet. I don't talk that way in public. I lay my Virginia on extra thick just because I know I can. I'm a person of fluid identity in about as many ways as you can imagine, and I did not feel at home when I started traveling to places with actual culture. I used to think that America had no real culture, or that white people had no real culture. If you live in Greece, New York, which is dominantly of Italian lineage, you will find that the city has an incredibly distinct Italian-American culture that doesn't exist literally anywhere else in the world. If you grow up in Virginia, nothing ever seems unique. I didn't know until I was an adult how many of the chains I grew up with were only a few locations in the Hampton Roads area, because from my perspective, this was just the standard state of the world. I called Virginia Beach a nihilistic suburban void before I left in search of a place I could forge an identity, only to realize that I already have one. After all, being nihilistic has always been one of my greatest comforts. What is Virginia's culture? Everything and nothing at once. There is no local culture to VA because we don't need it. We have all the things that everyone else is doing on the East Coast, upon which we are centrally located. Everything I hear on the radio comes from Atlanta, including the rock music. Even bands that are uniquely popular here compared to other places I lived, such as Volbeat, are fucking Danish. The only way you see a concert in Virginia Beach is if a concert is coming through, or if you're at a bar. It's all or nothing, because there's nothing established, no preset course for identity. You have to amalgamate it from everywhere else, and since all of us grow up with our own collection of influences from all these places, we're all totally different from one another and struggle to relate unless we've been in close proximity for a long time or do the same job. You're never going to be popular in Virginia because nothing is popular here. You go somewhere else if you want to be popular, and you become another person, or else you just reach such a huge number of specific people all over the world with similar bizarre coalitions of influences that you can be successful. The only musicians I can name from Virginia Beach are some of the most successful and unique pop acts of the last 2 decades. Missy Elliott and Timbaland came from the area, pushing a general sound of freakiness and weird impressionism for its own sake. Pharrell Williams is a beige-wearing, one-size-fits-all pop idol that literally no one cares about, yet everyone is okay with. One of his music videos, It Girl, was made by Takashi Murakami, creator of the superflat style of Japanese pop art, which celebrates postmodern, everything-goes cuteness dump trucking. The video is also unapologetically lolicon in a way that made me incredibly jealous as the city's most notoriously over-the-top anime degenerate. Lil Uglymane is one of the most relatable artists on planet Earth to me, hailing from Richmond. His body of work encompasses every conceivable musical genre and style, just like mine, with lyrics about a fractured identity he struggled to come to grips with his entire life, just like mine. He became most famous for helping to reinvigorate the Memphis rap sound popularized by 666 Mafia, largely by working with a group from Florida called Raider Clan, which was couched in reference to that city's musical aesthetic. Virginia is for lovers, it's true, a land of true romance, where every man is an island until they can build an archipelago with a bunch of other islands all over the world. It's an actual legitimate dystopia. It actually is literally a fucking cyberpunk setting, a real-life police state where everything looks really, really beautiful and every single person who lives here is deeply troubled. Probably because we only have food chains. Probably because we have constant jet noise every day. Probably because we have a green, filthy ocean and river we swim in. Probably because our houses are built a little too far apart and we like it that way. Probably because you literally can't get anywhere by walking. You need to drive to live here. Probably because we don't have any identity of our own as a community. Probably because it's really goddamn loud here. Virginia is for schizos. This is a piece that I wrote for the encyclopedia.zone forums and just decided I might as well publish as well on the channel. You should definitely read encyclopedia.zone because it is sick. It's got some big updates coming soon that are definitely going to be worth checking out. I wanted to add to this story something that I hadn't really completely picked up on until more recently, is just how inconspicuously built out Virginia Beach is, because Virginia Beach feels incredibly spread out because of the fact that it takes a while to get anywhere. There's a lot of suburban sprawl, and the areas where you go to buy things, the shopping areas are very sort of cordoned off. And it took me a long time to really understand why the city is so spread out until I really learned my way around and started looking at maps of it, which is that there are a lot of rivers running through it, that it is just completely intersected by water all the way throughout, and that there are just long stretches where you can't really tell that you are getting around a body of water because it's obfuscated. And so the city doesn't seem because of the fact that they are still building out the southern end of the city, it is building downwards, but from the north down, it seems like it's very spread out, but in reality it's spread out because of water, not because of land. And so, there are lots of houses, a lot of it's very old, and you know, lots of shopping areas and stuff. But like the development that's happening through the city is happening southward, because the southern half of the city is all farmland, and in between the farmland and the you know, the city half that is the northern half is like a midsection of just like less built out you know, suburbs where there's just room for development, and that development is happening rapidly. So so yeah, like the city, it's very verdant. There's lots of trees everywhere. Like, you know, the roads are really big, because there's like a few lifeblood roads that basically run through the entire city, and they're like these huge 4-lane roads that, you know, in between the left and right side have like a meridian full of plants. So you see trees just everywhere all the time, and you know, I had never truly appreciated it until I went to the Philippines and saw Manila, which is a concrete jungle where there's no greenery almost at all. And like the metropolitan area of Manila is about the same size as just Virginia Beach, the city, but it feels unimaginably larger because it takes so long to get around in the, you know, through public transit, and it's just like constantly clogged because there's so many people. It's so insanely dense. Virginia Beach, the population could fit inside of one mall in the Philippines 10 times over. But, you know, it is so spread out, again, because it is built around all this water. And so, you know, there's just like the reason it feels like a somehow endless suburb is that it is a fully developed suburb, a fully developed area, not unlike Boston, except that Boston is built in the shape of like a brain, where like all the roads are thin and intersecting, and you don't have to travel very far to get anywhere. Like, you can reasonably walk, you can reasonably take public transit, and even if you drive, you never have a long drive because of the way the city is structured. Virginia Beach is the opposite. You have to drive to get places, as I said in this story. And so even though it feels like it just incidentally is a very, you know, green and verdant city, all of the trees that are there have been deliberately planted. It's all human developed forests. It's all, you know, like they are all uniform in what kind of plants are there, and you can see what, like, there are parts of town that are natural, and there are like nature preserves, there are swamps, there are areas of town that are natural growths, but they're very different and they're out of the way. And like, for the people living here, they don't really know this stuff. Like, they don't think of it as being unnatural nature, you know? But like, when you know, like, if you watch Only Yesterday and you get like red pilled on what the so-called countryside really is, and then you look at Virginia Beach, and even the farmland, the southern part of it, is all developed. It is 100. If you look at a map, it is all farm. None of it is, you know, natural formation at all. So yeah, even though it feels like you're out in this big open field and space and with nature, it's like it's completely deliberate, you know. So in that sense, it is a utopian type place, except that it is actually a dystopia because it will make you a schizo. That's what I was trying to say with this post. So I hope you enjoyed.